Well, colleagues, I hope your Tuesday is off to a good start. We are so glad that you can spend some time with us to learn more about the next steps in a really important and exciting project, made possible, of course, by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, for whose support we are very, very grateful. We're going to talk about preparing a proposal to participate in the CGS Humanities Coalition. But I just want to say that every day I read the newspaper, listen to the news, talk to friends, and I'm reminded again and again how critically important the humanities are for us at this time and in this place. Whether it is philosophers debating the meaning of truth, to historians who are helping us to understand today's story, to literature majors and others who find the power of narrative to create identity and heal communities. The humanities bring a skill set that is incredibly valuable to each of us as citizens and to the world writ large. I know I don't need to convince you of that. You wouldn't be here if you didn't believe that to be true. And yet this is also precisely the moment when helping our students understand and see the various career possibilities that are enabled by advanced study in the humanities has been incredibly important. So I'm glad you're with us. I look forward to the webinar. Before I turn it over to my colleague, Julia Kent, just a couple of quick reminders. First, you know the protocol. Please keep your microphone muted and camera off until we get to the question and answer period. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time via the chat function. I do want you to know that the event is being recorded. So I can't imagine your question wouldn't be appropriate for posterity, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that. And then after the presentation, please feel free to continue submitting questions either through chat or by raising your hand. And we will call on speakers and ask them to unmute. So without further ado, Julia, take it away.
Thanks so much, Suzanne, and welcome to everybody who is joining us today. We're really glad that we've seen such great interest in this opportunity, and we're very grateful to the Mellon Foundation for their support. I plan to present for about 30 minutes today, after which time I am going to open things up for Q&A and ask my colleagues Suzanne Ortega and Hiranao Okahana to join me in responding to your questions. But first, I am going to say a few words about this project and how it's situated in the context of the PhD Career Pathways Initiative. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging that this project is guided by an advisory board of very distinguished colleagues named on the screen. Many of them are Mellon grantees themselves, and we were encouraged by the Mellon Foundation to include their voices in the development of this project and to give us ongoing feedback on its development. Members of this advisory committee will be selected to serve on the selection committee for the RFP, and we will ensure that no one representing an institution that has submitted a proposal for this competition will be involved in the review of proposals, out of fairness to all of you submitting proposals for this round. So the first thing we want to stress as we talk about how this project fits within the larger humanities PhD Career Pathways Initiative is that it is really designed to build on what we have already learned in previous work funded by Mellon and also by the National Endowment for the Humanities. What we mean by that is that CGS is building on data from the PhD career pathways to shape this request for proposals. And in fact, you will see that the areas of priority identified in the RFP have been built upon gaps identified in our analysis of the career pathways data at the national level. And we'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. We are also building upon lessons learned from an NEH-funded Next Generation Humanities PhD project that wrapped up in 2017. And you'll see that 2 publications that resulted from that work are listed in the RFP as resources that you can use and draw upon as you develop your proposal. We also encourage proposers to build upon the lessons learned from their own individual PhD career pathways initiatives. And this is why this opportunity is restricted to current awardees, affiliates, collecting data using the PhD career pathways instruments, who have submitted at least 1 round of data to CGS. And you'll note in the selection criteria that we indicate that competitive proposals will provide evidence that the institution is building upon lessons learned through its participation in the PhD career pathways project. And again, I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. So the first set of resources that we point to in the RFP as a resource for you to use in developing your own proposals are these 2 reports. They can be found on the CGS website, and there are links to them in the RFP, Promising Practices in Humanities PhD Professional Development. We really encourage you to consider some of the lessons that came out of this project, which is fairly recent. There are strategies for engaging a broad range of stakeholders on campus in the work of diversifying PhD careers in the humanities. There are strategies for engaging alumni and developing new programs, and it's a great resource to use as you develop your own work. We also have a summary of prior work in humanities PhD professional development that summarizes the work of other organizations, not just CGS, and draws out some of the lessons learned from this work. We were really encouraged by the Mellon Foundation not to reinvent the wheel with this project. And so proposers who can demonstrate that they have thoughtfully considered prior work in this area will be most competitive. A second set of resources that we are encouraging you to review as you develop your proposals, are those developed by my colleague Hiranao Okahana and his team. Data briefs on our analysis of PhD career pathways data from institutions participating in the project. And there are 5 briefs listed here that provide both highlights of the data, what we've learned so far, as well as strategies for incorporating the insights from our analysis into your own institutional strategy. As you develop your proposal, it's not necessary to take into consideration all of these insights. Of course, we hope that you will focus your energies and your strategy in a way that is appropriate to your institution. But please don't overlook these resources because they are really useful places to get started. I'm now going to focus on the RFP itself. And as I begin, I want to acknowledge that I will not cover all aspects of the RFP. That should really be your guide star in preparing the proposal. But will, for now, focus on the areas that our team thought would be of most interest to you in this presentation. And if I don't cover certain topics, Please feel free to raise them in the Q&A period or to email me directly, and I'll make sure that the right member of our team addresses your question. So I'll start with some selection criteria of note. And again, these are not all of the selection criteria, but the ones that we really wanted to emphasize. So the first criterion that we single out is that institutions that provide evidence that the institution is building on lessons learned through its participation in the PhD Career Pathways project, as well as any other relevant initiatives, will be in the best position to have a competitive proposal. Demonstrating that you have reflected thoughtfully and carefully on what you have learned through your participation in career pathways or other initiatives that you might be involved with, focusing on humanities PhD education or on diversifying PhD careers, will really put the proposal in a stronger position for consideration. The second criterion we want to outline is the importance of outlining a clear, organized, and realistic plan to pilot an intervention in one of the 3 priority areas outlined in the proposal. And these are building professional networks and relationships, preparing for diverse teaching and higher education roles, and grant writing and securing resources for research, scholarship, and programs. Now, we recognize that these are probably the areas where you may have a lot of questions. You may have questions about whether your idea fits within one of these 3 areas, but we'll be happy to address questions in the Q&A, and also to have follow-up conversations with you by email or phone if you have questions about whether what you have in mind fits within one of these 3 areas. Again, each one of these areas was identified by our analysis of the data that came out of the National Career Pathways data set. The first one, building professional networks and relationships, was actually identified to be an area of under preparation in both PhD Career Pathways and in the NEH Next Gen project. The second, preparing for diverse teaching in higher education roles, builds on a finding from that's outlined in one of the data briefs that shows that PhD alumni who work at institutions where teaching is a primary responsibility in relation to research feel less prepared than their peers at research institutions for their roles. And thirdly, grant writing and securing resources for research, scholarship, and programs builds on a finding also outlined in the data briefs that humanities PhDs do not receive preparation in grant writing to the extent that one might expect, given that this is a role that PhDs and alumni in the humanities often play in a wide variety of careers post-PhDs. You will note that in each one of these categories, we provide some 4 examples of types of programs that you might build or expand upon. These are not all encompassing lists, and we encourage you and invite you to develop new programmatic areas within these categories that fit your institution's goals and interests. So the third criterion we wanted to touch on is to describe how the project fits within broader strategies to improve humanities PhD education at your institution. Basically, we are looking to make sure that the program that you're either developing or expanding upon is not siloed. It's not a standalone project that does not benefit from other work at your institutions to broaden PhD education in the humanities, and that you are taking a systemic approach to change. This could mean a lot of different things. It could mean engaging others in your institution who are involved in similar work in the building or the expansion of the work you are proposing to do. It might mean creating partnerships with other offices on campus that are working towards similar goals. But we want to make sure that you have considered ways to connect the program or programs that you're considering building or expanding into a broader institutional strategy for systemic change in humanities PhD education. Fourth, demonstrate the capacity of the project team to successfully implement all proposed activities. We really want to underline that competitive proposals will meaningfully engage faculty and doctoral students in the design and the execution of the work. I'll just skip ahead one slide here to highlight another resource that's named in the proposal, Shaping Narratives of New Narratives of PhD Careers, a resource to advocate for career diversity. This resource provides examples of inclusive language, examples of positive messages about career diversity, and strategies for using social media and other communication outlets that can be used to engage students and faculty and others in the work that you're doing. So we encourage you to take a look at that resource as well. And then finally, we ask that you identify metrics of success for your proposed project and describe how progress towards them will be monitored by your institution. We do not require a theory of change or a graphic that is often required in STEM proposals. However, if you would like to provide one, that would be fine. The main goal is that the proposal is clear about what its overall goals are, its objectives, and has clear metrics for deciding whether those goals have been achieved. So finally, we'll conclude with proposal preparation. We hope that this is pretty straightforward. We designed it to be pretty self-explanatory, but we're happy to take questions that you might have. There is a cover form that's provided with the RFP, and it's on the CGS website. This will ask you to provide some basic information about contacts for the project and to identify the area of intervention that you'll be focusing on in the project. Separate from that is the proposal narrative, which is a maximum 10 pages. This includes an overview, a section on prior and ongoing work. And this is where we ask you to really explain how the proposed plan of work fits within other strategic initiatives to improve humanities doctoral education at your institution. Third, we ask you to describe the proposed activities, the engagement strategy that you will use to get buy-in and support for this project, and finally, the success metrics that I just described. There is also a section on supplementary materials that should include a budget justification, a brief description of project personnel and their roles. This is 1 to 2 pages. We ask for a letter of support from the university president or provost that demonstrates institutional support in case there is a leadership change, and at least one letter of support from a graduate program director or department chair who will play a role in your project. We recognize that you may have some questions about allowable costs for the budget, and we will definitely reserve time in the discussion for any questions about what could be charged to this grant. And I just want to note in closing that supplementary materials do not count toward the 10-page limit of the proposal narrative. So now we will pause and open it up for questions. We'll be monitoring these. I just want to invite my colleagues, Suzanne Ortega and Hiranau Okahana, to join me. We will be doing our best to answer questions from the audience, and please bear with us if we don't answer questions in exactly the order in which we're asked. We will do our very best to stay on top of them, and if for any reason we don't get to your question in the time allotted, we will be sure to follow up with you by email to make sure that your question is addressed. So at this point, I'm going to take down slides and open it up for questions. And the first question is, will these slides be shared with everyone? The answer is yes. And we will also be sharing the recording of this webinar with all of the eligible institutions who are considering putting in a proposal for this project. The first question is, are personnel costs allowable in the budget, i.e. salaries? And the short answer to that question is yes. But Suzanne, if you'd like to add anything to that, I will call on you.
No, I was just going to say yes.
Yes, and if you have questions about allowable costs, you can also contact us directly, and we'll be happy to follow up with you. We have a question in the chat about whether the RFP, the link to the RFP is correct. The answer is yes. That is the link in the chat to the RFP is the correct one. The next question is, can you remind me how many departments or programs from an institution should ideally be participating in the proposal, e.g. 3 or 4? This is an important question. So we require that all proposers include English and history in their proposals. If you would like to add additional departments and programs, that is certainly up to you. And I don't think we would state that adding programs would necessarily make an institution more competitive. A very thoughtful, strong proposal involving just humanities or just English and history could be very competitive. The one thing I think we would say is that if you add additional departments and programs, that you make sure that you have the resources and the organizational capacity to manage their participation in the project. Next question. Are you looking to fund a certain number of institutions in the study, or is it more in line with as many as we have strong proposals? Our hope is to be able to fund 10 universities at $48,000 a piece. We will certainly not give out more awards than that, but we will also ensure that all 10 of those institutions meet the selection criteria for the proposal for the RFP. Suzanne, do you want to add to that, Hiro?
I mean, I guess I would, the only thing I would say is that often we are unable to fund every competitive, good, strong proposal. And there is always an option to become an affiliate of the project, which means we won't be able to give you funding to support your work, but you can become a part of the community and share in conversations and lessons learned as they're unfolding.
Yeah. We have another question. Are there metrics for success that we should plan to include for CGS and Mellon in addition to what our individual institutions want to use? I am going to turn that question over to Hiro.
You see the question. Well, the success metric that you're going to use is something that for your institution to hold yourself accountable and sort of tell us that what exactly that you are going to do. For our end, CGS, we will look at overarching the impact of this project, but we also understand that each institution, each subordinate institution will have different focuses and different approaches in creating these subordinate activities. And we certainly are not going to impose any additional, or we will try to minimize any additional burden on evaluation activities from our end. So we will be looking to the way you're going to define your success metric as a way for us to keep track and do our evaluation of these project activities too. So in the end, that is really that you get to define and to tell us in the proposal narrative, like how you plan to hold yourself accountable with the subboard, and we will use that to some extent to help you hold yourself accountable.
Thanks, Hiro. The next question is, are there any eligibility restrictions or requirements for institutions which participated previously in the NEH NextGen Humanities PhD Planning Grant? The answer to that question is no. If you participated in that proposal and received funding from NEH, you are eligible to put in a proposal for this completely different grant program, as long as you meet CGS's eligibility requirements, which are simply to be a CGS member in good standing and to be an awardee or affiliate that has submitted one round of data to CGS. So the questions have slowed down a little bit as we wait for more to come in. Are there any things that my colleagues, Suzanne and Hiro, would like to say, things you'd like to stress for institutions considering putting in a proposal?
Julie, you have covered the material beautifully. I'll just reinforce the fact that we see this as a great opportunity to build on things you've already learned and are already doing, to bring either existing projects to scale, to more deeply embed them in graduate education or in the university, or to develop new pilot projects that complement things you either have learned or things you suspect you're learning. So again, we will not change the world with one project, but if we're really smart about leveraging one another's efforts and our own internal efforts, we might get closer.
Thanks, Suzanne. And we had a really good question come in while you were speaking. The question is this: it sounds like universities that have already engaged in this kind of work will offer the strongest proposals. Is that a correct assessment? I think the answer to this question is not necessarily. Universities that are just getting started in working to diversify PhD career pathways and to support PhD professional development and career pathways in the humanities could put together an extremely strong proposal as long as it builds upon lessons learned, demonstrates that you are using information that you have collected through PhD career pathways or from other sources, maybe even homegrown programs on campuses, and puts together a well thought out and ambitious plan to create or expand an initiative in one of the areas. We will be paying attention to the diversity of our cohort of funded initiatives. We believe that funding institutions that are at different stages of this work and that may have different circumstances or maybe of different institutional types will contribute to the richness of this work and the diversity of the cohort. So again, just because your institution may be getting started in this work, that does not necessarily mean that you can't put together a very competitive proposal. Suzanne, Hiro, is there anything else you'd like to say on that one?
No, I'm good.
All right. It looks like we have another question. I want to thank you for not overwhelming me with questions and submitting them one at a time. So we have a question. It's this: following on this thread, can you say a few words about how sustainable you want these initiatives to be? Do you want these funds to be the start of something we'll institutionalize going forward? That is always the dream. I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne so she can answer that one.
I would say that the short answer is ideally yes. They should be projects that you believe are sustainable. All of you have been around long enough to know that it's easy to get something started when you have grant money. And even if it was a really good project, they go away when the money ends. So I think really thinking about starting with a notion of both where you want to be and what's sustainable helps to build a project, both that can have real impact, but that actually you can demonstrate its utility or you can make it affordable to continue. So the answer is really try to design with scale and sustainability in mind as goals. And I don't know, Hiro, maybe you want to add any additional thought?
Well, we're a half an hour in, 33 minutes, and I don't see any more questions. I hope that means that our proposal was just so clear in its requirements and our advice that means we've answered all of your questions. Suzanne, do you want to end things here and invite institutions who have other questions to follow up by email?
That sounds right to me. Sometimes the questions come up only as you start trying to lay out some ideas on a piece of paper. We're here. All of us are here to answer your questions, eager to do so. And we really look forward to working with you on this and other projects.
Thanks, Suzanne. I am just going to share a last couple of slides. We, of course, want to recognize our funders that we are extremely grateful to in making this work possible, and in particular, the Mellon Foundation for this phase of the initiative. Our project team is listed here. I am serving as sort of the main point of contact for questions about this RFP. But if there are questions that I feel that Suzanne or Hiro are in a better position to answer, I will certainly bring them into the loop. And then just a reminder that CGS will be circulating a link to this webinar recording to this group and to all eligible institutions. And we welcome, we invite you to share that with other colleagues who maybe weren't able to participate in this webinar, who will be working on the proposal. And in closing, here's my email address for follow-up. And again, we really welcome additional comments and questions from anyone considering submitting a proposal. And with that, we will close the webinar. Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your day.